Welcome into another Locked On NBA Insider Report. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens, joined by Sirius XM radio host and our Locked On NBA Insider, Antonio Daniels. The regular season has come to a close, so we're going to talk playoffs. We'll start off in the Eastern Conference. The play-in tournament may have some of the best talent in the Eastern Conference, which is saying something because it's loaded from top to bottom. Obviously, the Nets are a favorite for some people. Who do you see kind of coming out of the play-in tournament in the East, Antonio?
For me, this is a different year. Obviously, it's a different year because of COVID, because of the global pandemic, because of injuries, because of Kyrie Irving's situation with him not being present the first half of the season, and then the second half of the season being present only half of the time. So the Nets right now are not a regular 7 seed.
Right.
They're not a regular 7 seed. And Cleveland got up to a really good start. But there are teams that are going to suffer on both the East and the West because of different situations that transpired throughout the course of this season. So when you look at the Nets, they have to me, the most skilled duo in the playoffs with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. Now, if you add a Ben Simmons to that, a physically and mentally healthy Ben Simmons along with the role players, you can't tell me that's the number 7 seed. Because you put that team together all year long, you're talking about a top 4 team, a team that potentially has home court in the first round. So the Nets are not a regular seed. And I definitely see the Nets advancing and beating Cleveland in the play-in tournament, especially with them having home court.
And that's, saying so, they're going to take on either, if they win, they'll take on the Celtics. That's, the prize you get for getting the 2 seed is you get the Nets in the first round. Who do you see coming out of that? Because that could be a tight matchup as well.
Well, right now, because of, I guess, the question mark that is Robert Williams and his health. Will he be available? If he is available, how healthy will he be? Because if you're the Nets, you're making out because you're missing the Cleveland Cavaliers, first and foremost, without Jared Allen, because Jared Allen has been ruled out for the play-in game. And now, secondly, you're getting but this is what the playoffs are all about.
Right.
There's not a playoffs that takes place where there's not a what if somewhere in there. What if Jared Allen was available? What if Robert Williams was available? Because the Boston Celtics, toward the end of the season, was one of the hottest teams in the league with Robert Williams anchoring that defense, though. You remove him from the equation, now you're talking about a shootout. And any time in today's NBA, Boston, again, with Robert Williams, is one of the best defensive teams in the league. But we are talking about an old-fashioned Eastern Conference shootout. I'm putting my money on Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. I'm putting my money on those guys because when we talk about skill, the ability to put the ball in the hole, you have 2 of the best to ever do it. As good as Jason Tatum has been, as good as Jaylen Brown has been, you're talking about a 2-time champion in Kevin Durant and a 1-time champion in Kyrie Irving. So the lights won't be too big for them. So coming out of that particular series, I got to rock with Brooklyn again.
I think a lot of people will be betting with you on that too. As far as the first round, we don't know, other than the play-in tournament, there's 2 others that are set. I think one of the more exciting ones might be the Sixers and Raptors, just because of how they faced off against each other throughout the season. Are the Sixers going to be disappointing once again and go out in the first round, or do you think they can handle it?
That's the question. Kainani, that is the question. And there are so many what ifs with the Philadelphia 76ers.
There are.
Because I think when you look at the totality of the playoffs, is there a player in the playoffs that has more pressure on him than James Harden? And I mean the pressure to perform in big game situations. Everybody's watching that. How is he going to perform? And I think the Toronto Raptors, what I love about Nick Nurse is his ability to scheme defensively. Like, that's why this is interesting, because you have Philadelphia, who has obviously Joel Embiid in the season that he's had, the historic season that he's had. But the Toronto Raptors, on the flip side, they play small. Yeah. They play small ball. They basically play almost 5 perimeter players. So now it's a matchup advantage on one end for Joel Embiid, but it's the matchup disadvantage for Joel Embiid on the other end. So that I'm with you, Kainani. That's going to be one of the more interesting series to watch, because I think a lot of eyes will be on James Harden and how he plays alongside Joel Embiid, because he's going to have a lot of pressure on him to perform, but also with Nick Nurse's ability to scheme defensively, throw different looks at different teams. So I'm with you. That'll be a very interesting one. And It's tough. It's tough. I'm gonna take Philly. I'm gonna
Okay.
take Philly because I have a little more confidence in James Harden, even though after the honeymoon phase, it hasn't been all sweet
Yeah.
in the city of brotherly love. It hasn't been sweet. When they got past that honeymoon stage, it's been some rough terrain. So and that was the question when James Harden got there though. Is
Right.
not how would they perform when things are going well, but how would they perform when adversity hits? We're about to find out.
It certainly comes to him with having been playing in so many different places that follows him
Yep.
around, right? So I think that's one of those series where either one could come out and you wouldn't be super surprised by that. But the East is kind of like that as a whole because we've talked about there's 3, 4 teams maybe that you could see coming out of the Eastern Conference. Do you have a feeling right now? I know the Celtics were hot going in. Miami's the number 1 seed. The defending champs are in there. You know, Brooklyn too. Where are you leaning right now?
Right now, I have to lean toward Milwaukee. I have to, and you're right, Kanani, because there's a number of teams. There's a drastic difference between the East and the West, because I think there's a lot of teams that could actually represent the East in the NBA Finals.
Yeah.
You can look at Miami with Kyle Lowry, his championship experience, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, those guys that have been to the NBA Finals in the bubble. And then you can go and you can look at Philly. We talked about James Harden and Joel Embiid. Obviously, the Milwaukee Bucks with Giannis Antetokounmpo, Chris Middleton, and Drew Holiday. Then you can look at a team like the Boston Celtics, who were extremely hot heading into the postseason. So I think it's a number of teams that if they came out of the East, it wouldn't really be a surprise. Also, you can look at Brooklyn. You can look at Brooklyn. Even though they are a 7th seed, as we talked about, they are not your regular 7th seed because of the situation and circumstances that have played themselves throughout the course of the season. There are a lot of, I'm going with the Milwaukee Bucks. That's who I'm going with right now. I honestly feel like their championship pedigree that they established in a year ago, I think that's going to pay itself off. Look, no disrespect to Miami being the number 1 seed, but Miami doesn't have that guy. Now, again, if we go back to Jimmy Butler being in the bubble, if that Jimmy Butler shows up, we're having a different conversation. I'm talking about the 30, 40-point Jimmy Butler. That guy shows up, we're having a completely different conversation. But right now, because of what they accomplished last year, the role familiarity, the coaching, I have to go with the Milwaukee Bucks right now to represent the East in the NBA Finals.
You mentioned it, though. It's all about who shows up come postseason time, and we don't know who that's going to be. So that's what makes it so exciting for us. Antonio, thank you for joining us once again. That's a preview for the Eastern Conference Finals or playoffs as a whole. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On NBA.